Chaos on bread? That is an easy verdict when you are judging America from thousands of miles away. But what happens when the critics finally take one bite? A Chicago-style hot dog may look like America ignored every rule in the kitchen, yet that first taste can expose something much bigger. How much of this country has been judged before it was ever experienced? And if they were wrong about the food, what else did they get wrong? Garden on a bun. There are hot dogs, and then there is the Chicago version, which looks as if somebody opened the refrigerator, invited every vegetable inside, and somehow made the whole meeting work. For Europeans arriving in the United States during the World Cup summer of 2026, that first look can be genuinely confusing. A hot dog back home is often visually simpler. In Germany, a bratwurst in a roll may rely on mustard and the sausage itself to do most of the talking. In Denmark, street hot dogs can certainly come loaded with toppings, but the ingredients are usually arranged with a very different rhythm. Chicago takes another route entirely. The city puts an all-beef frankfurter into a poppy seed bun, then adds yellow mustard, chopped onion, bright green relish, tomato wedges, a pickle spear, sport peppers, and celery salt. At first glance, it can resemble a small produce aisle that has somehow obtained a driver's license. That is exactly why calling it chaos on bread sounds reasonable for about 5 seconds. Then comes the bite. The surprise is that Chicago did not pile those ingredients together by accident. The pickle brings cold crunch, the tomato softens the saltiness, the peppers add heat, the onion gives it a sharp snap, and the relish supplies sweetness. Even the celery salt earns its place. What looks crowded on camera becomes strangely organized once everything reaches the same bite. Americans even have a perfect local expression for it. The hot dog has been dragged through the garden. Only America could make salad sound like something that happened during a police chase. That playful excess is part of what many visitors misunderstand about American food before experiencing it in person. From overseas headlines and social media clips, the United States can easily become a collection of oversized portions, strange combinations, and jokes about unhealthy eating. The actual experience is usually more interesting. Regional American food is full of rules, rivalries, local pride, and tiny details that residents defend with the seriousness Europeans might reserve for cheese, bread, or football. Chicago even has one famous boundary. Ketchup traditionally stays away from the classic Chicago dog. Nobody needs to call the condiment police, of course, but locals have very strong feelings about maintaining the balance of the original combination. That alone tells you this is more than random excess. It is a food tradition with its own grammar. And during a World Cup trip, that can change the way visitors see the country surprisingly quickly. Stadiums may bring people to America, but ordinary experiences often make them want to stay a little longer. A neighborhood counter, a paper-wrapped lunch, a server who already knows how the order should be built. The Chicago dog captures something Americans understand instinctively. The country has never been afraid to take familiar things, add one more ingredient than seems reasonable, and somehow turn the result into a local institution. What looked like chaos from across the Atlantic suddenly tastes remarkably well planned. Wings take over. Some American foods win people over quietly. Buffalo wings have never shown the slightest interest in behaving that way. They arrive glossy with sauce, smelling of butter, vinegar, and pepper, with enough napkins nearby to suggest that everybody already knows how this story ends. For European visitors discovering American food during the World Cup summer of 2026, wings can reveal something much bigger than a different way of cooking chicken. They show how Americans turned eating into participation. You are not simply ordering dinner, you are choosing the heat, arguing over sauces, reaching across the table, comparing reactions, and pretending the final wing absolutely belongs to somebody else. That social side is where buffalo wings become unusually American. The dish itself is generally traced to Buffalo, New York, where the Anchor Bar began serving chicken wings with a hot sauce and butter mixture in 1964. What started as inexpensive bar food eventually became woven into American sports culture so deeply that the numbers now sound almost ridiculous. For Super Bowl Sunday in 2024, the National Chicken Council estimated Americans would eat about 45 billion chicken wings. Laid end to end, that would be enough wings to make a chicken wonder whether it had accidentally joined the interstate system. The scale matters because this is not really restaurant food in the formal European sense. In cities such as Paris, Lyon, or Brussels, a meal shared with friends can revolve around conversation while plates arrive in courses and the food keeps a certain degree of order. Britain has its pub snacks and Germany has its beer hall favorites, of course, but American wings invite a different kind of table behavior. Nobody worries much about elegance once the sauce reaches the fingertips. The whole point is that everyone joins the same delicious mess. There's also something deeply American about being asked how brave you feel before dinner. Mild, medium, hot, barbecue, garlic, honey, smoky, sweet, extra spicy. The exact menu changes from restaurant to restaurant, but the basic idea remains familiar across the country. America loves giving people choices, even when the object being customized is 12 pieces of chicken that will disappear before halftime. A European visitor accustomed to ordering one established version of a regional specialty can suddenly face a menu that treats sauce selection like a minor constitutional right. That freedom is part of the appeal. Buffalo wings do not demand that newcomers understand some complicated culinary tradition before enjoying themselves. Choose a sauce, grab one, make a questionable decision about the spice level, and learn immediately. Perhaps that explains why foods like this can reshape a visitor's impression of America so quickly. From afar, American portions and sports bar food are easy material for jokes. Up close, the experience feels far warmer. Tables crowded with friends, servers carrying baskets meant to be shared, strangers cheering at the same screen, and everybody passing the ranch or blue cheese without ceremony. The wing itself is small. The culture around it certainly is not. And once visitors understand that, American food stops looking like excess for the sake of excess. It begins to look like something America does exceptionally well, taking an ordinary bite of food and turning it into an excuse for an entire room to have fun together. Smoke makes magic. A slab of beef can spend half a day inside a smoker and somehow emerge with more personality than some people manage to develop in 40 years. That is the first clue that Texas brisket belongs to a completely different branch of American food culture, one built around patience rather than speed. For visitors used to European grilling traditions, the time commitment alone can feel almost comical. In Germany, bratwurst can move from grill to plate within minutes. Across Britain, steaks, sausages, and burgers dominate many backyard barbecues because they cook quickly enough for everyone to eat before the weather changes its mind. Texas brisket looks at that schedule, closes the calendar, and decides dinner will be ready whenever the smoke says so. A full brisket commonly weighs somewhere around 10 to 15 pounds before cooking, and traditional low and slow barbecue can keep it over wood smoke for 10, 12, or even 14 hours, depending on size, temperature, and technique. During that time, collagen inside one of the toughest working muscles on the animal gradually softens, while rendered fat keeps the meat rich and moist. The dark exterior known as bark develops from smoke, seasoning, heat, and time until the outside looks almost aggressively serious. Then somebody slices it and the whole intimidating act collapses into tenderness. That contrast may be the most addictive part of brisket. It smells rugged, looks almost black around the edges, and arrives with the visual confidence of something that has been parked beside a woodpile since sunrise. Yet a properly cooked slice bends over a finger, separates with gentle pressure, and carries smoke deep enough that sauce becomes optional rather than necessary. There is something wonderfully American about spending 12 hours making a food that can disappear from the plate in 12 minutes. Texas did not invent smoking meat from nothing, of course. Central Texas barbecue grew through a mixture of American cattle culture and immigrant traditions, including German and Czech meat market practices during the 19th century. That history matters because brisket is a perfect example of how American food often works. Different communities arrive with techniques they already know. Local ingredients and conditions reshape them. And eventually something emerges that belongs unmistakably to its new home. What makes the experience especially striking for European visitors is the seriousness surrounding something that still feels completely casual. Famous barbecue joints can begin smoking meat long before customers wake up, and some sell brisket by weight until the day's supply is gone. There may be no white tablecloth, no silver dome lifted dramatically over the plate, and no tiny parsley leaf positioned by tweezers. Instead, somebody places deeply smoked beef on butcher paper, adds pickles and onions, and hands over a meal that required more preparation than many formal dinners. That is American confidence expressed through food rather than speeches. The appeal goes beyond tenderness because brisket rewards attention. Different woods produce different aromas, trimming changes how fat renders, temperature management changes texture, and even the direction of each slice matters because cutting across the grain makes the meat easier to chew. A dish that initially appears primitive turns out to be full of tiny decisions. For travelers who arrived expecting American cuisine to mean convenience, Texas brisket can quietly destroy that assumption before dessert. America certainly knows how to make food quickly, but it also knows when rushing would ruin everything. Sometimes the most memorable American meal begins before breakfast, spends the entire day surrounded by smoke, and finally reaches the table looking like Texas decided patience deserved its own flavor. Breakfast broke the rules. Chicken and waffles can look like somebody accidentally combined two separate restaurant orders and decided to charge for the mistake. One plate belongs in a diner at 9 in the morning, the other sounds more comfortable beside fries at dinner, yet America looked at that imaginary border and apparently decided it was taking up valuable table space. That strange pairing is exactly why the dish becomes so memorable. The real appeal is not simply that fried chicken tastes good or that waffles taste good. What hooks people is the collision between two flavors that many European food traditions usually keep in different lanes. A Belgian waffle in Brussels is commonly associated with powdered sugar, fruit, chocolate, or whipped cream. Fried chicken across Britain tends to stay firmly on the savory side, accompanied by fries, gravy, or sauces. Put syrup anywhere near that chicken, and a first-time visitor may watch the bottle approach the plate with a concern normally reserved for somebody reversing a rental car without insurance. Then the syrup reaches the crust. Suddenly the combination makes much more sense than its appearance suggests. The waffle is soft inside, with browned edges, the chicken brings salt and crunch, while maple syrup moves between the two and turns every bite into a sweet, salty contrast. Add butter and hot sauce, as many American versions do, and the plate starts bouncing between rich, spicy, sweet, and savory without settling down long enough to become boring. That is the narrow little secret worth understanding here. American food is unusually comfortable letting flavors cross boundaries. Chicken and waffles also carries real American history. Versions involving waffles and poultry appeared among Pennsylvania Dutch communities much earlier, although those dishes were different from today's fried chicken version. The combination Americans now recognize became strongly connected with African American food culture and Harlem nightlife during the 20th century. Wells Supper Club, a famous Harlem restaurant that opened in 1938, became especially associated with serving chicken and waffles to late-night diners, performers, and musicians. The timing itself helps explain the pairing beautifully. After a night out, it could be too late for dinner and too early for breakfast, so why force somebody to choose? That logic feels wonderfully at home in America. European cuisine has its own brilliant combinations built through centuries of tradition, but many famous dishes are protected by fairly clear expectations. Order carbonara in Rome, and people care deeply about what belongs in it. As for a proper Neapolitan pizza, and there are established methods behind the name. America has those traditions too, yet it also has another instinct running beside them. Curiosity about what happens when two familiar foods are allowed to meet without asking permission first. Chicken and waffles is that instinct sitting on a plate. And perhaps this is why American food can become much harder to dismiss once travelers actually eat it, rather than judge it through photos online. A picture emphasizes the apparent contradiction. The mouth discovers the engineering. The dish also explains something larger about why visitors can grow attached to eating in the United States during a long World Cup stay. After enough meals here, the question stops being, why would Americans put these together? And slowly becomes, why did nobody introduce me to this sooner? By then the syrup has already crossed the border, the fried chicken has welcomed it in, and breakfast has officially lost jurisdiction over the waffle. America wins another argument by serving lunch. Sandwich with swagger. A proper Philly cheesesteak has the kind of confidence that makes utensils feel slightly embarrassed for showing up. Thin sliced beef, melted cheese, onions if you want them, all packed into a long roll that looks simple enough until the first bite proves how much character can fit inside something wrapped in paper. What makes this sandwich fascinating is not complexity, it is identity. Philadelphia turned a working-class street food into a civic symbol so recognizable that the sandwich practically carries its own zip code. The cheesesteak is generally traced to the 1930s when brothers Pat and Harry Olivieri began selling chopped steak sandwiches from a hot dog stand in South Philadelphia. Cheese was added later, and over time the formula became inseparable from the city itself. Today, Pat's King of Steaks and Geno's Steaks still sit almost across from one another at the famous South Philadelphia intersection, serving as edible proof that Americans can turn lunch into a rivalry lasting generations. That local loyalty can feel unusual to visitors from Europe, even though Europe has plenty of fiercely regional food traditions of its own. Naples guards pizza with almost religious seriousness, while Lyon has its bouchon and Vienna has its schnitzel culture. The American difference often lies in how casually that pride is presented. Philadelphia does not need white tablecloths, silverware, or a century-old dining room to tell you food matters. Sometimes the evidence is grease on the wrapper and 10 people arguing about whether provolone, American cheese, or Cheese Whiz belongs on top. That argument is part of the charm. The sandwich works because every component understands its job. The beef is sliced thin enough to stay tender and absorb the juices on the griddle. The roll has to be soft enough to bite through, but sturdy enough not to surrender halfway down the block. The cheese melts into the meat rather than sitting politely on top, while onions add sweetness and a little bite without turning the whole thing into a salad disguised as dinner. There is almost no decoration, which is exactly why every mistake becomes obvious. That is a very different kind of American food pleasure from the towering, overloaded dishes people often expect after seeing social media clips from abroad. The cheesesteak does not need 12 toppings or a plate large enough to qualify for commercial real estate. Its appeal comes from repetition, local knowledge, and the confidence of doing a few things very well. Philadelphia's scale also gives the sandwich cultural weight. The city has more than 1.5 million residents, making it one of the largest cities in the United States, yet this humble sandwich remains one of its strongest culinary calling cards. That says something about how American regional culture works. A city can have major museums, universities, sports teams, and centuries of national history, and residents will still happily explain where you should get lunch before discussing any of them. For a European traveler crossing America during the World Cup, that can be unexpectedly endearing. Media coverage often presents the United States from 30,000 feet. Politics, highways, skyscrapers, arguments, spectacle. Food brings the view down to street level, where a city suddenly becomes easier to understand through one hot sandwich and the very serious opinion of the person standing next to you. And that may be the addictive part of a cheesesteak that has nothing to do with cheese. You are tasting Philadelphia's personality without being handed a brochure. By the time the wrapper is empty, America can feel less like one enormous country and more like dozens of proud local worlds, each convinced its neighborhood has figured out at least one thing better than everybody else. In Philadelphia, they may have a point. Luxury in a bun? Somewhere along the New England coast, America looked at lobster, one of the most expensive creatures on many European menus, and made a wonderfully rebellious decision. Put it in a soft bun and eat it with your hands. That single move explains why a lobster roll can be such a delightful culture shock. In Paris or London, lobster still carries a certain ceremony. You are more likely to meet it in an upscale seafood restaurant, surrounded by polished glasses, proper cutlery, and a bill that encourages everyone at the table to sit a little straighter. Along the coast of Brittany in France, lobster is closely tied to serious seafood cooking, while British restaurants often present native lobster grilled, thermidor style, or as the centerpiece of a formal plate. New England takes the same magnificent ingredient and lets it wear sneakers. A classic lobster roll usually starts with chunks of lobster meat tucked into a buttered, toasted split-top bun. Maine-style versions are commonly served chilled with a light coating of mayonnaise, while Connecticut is famous for serving the lobster warm with melted butter. There are debates over the details, naturally, because Americans can turn a sandwich preference into a state-level diplomatic issue before lunch. Yet the most interesting part is what the dish says about American food culture. Luxury does not always have to behave luxuriously. Maine's relationship with lobster helps make that possible. According to the Maine Department of Marine Resources, the state's commercial lobster harvest reached a record of roughly 132.6 million pounds in 2016. That number gives some perspective on how deeply lobster is woven into the economy and identity of the region. Along the Maine coast, lobster is not simply a special occasion ingredient imported into an elegant dining room. It is connected to working harbors, fishing families, roadside shacks, and summer trips, where the dress code can reasonably include flip-flops. That changes the emotional experience of eating it. A European visitor may recognize lobster as something expensive, but then encounter it at a weathered seafood shack where the counter is casual. The view might be better than the decor, and dinner arrives in paper rather than porcelain. Suddenly, an ingredient associated with celebration becomes something you can eat while watching boats move through the harbor. There's a beautiful confidence in that. The lobster itself provides the indulgence, so the rest of the sandwich barely needs to show off. Sweet, slightly firm meat meets warm bread and butter, with enough richness to feel special, but enough simplicity to keep the flavor recognizable. The bun serves almost like a very comfortable lobster delivery system, which is probably the least glamorous description possible for something people happily travel hundreds of miles to eat. And that informality can become addictive during a trip across America. The country has an unusual talent for taking foods associated with status and placing them into democratic settings. Great barbecue comes on butcher paper. Cheesesteaks arrive wrapped for the sidewalk. Lobster can show up in a bun beside potato chips. The pleasure is allowed to remain serious while the atmosphere refuses to take itself too seriously. For visitors who arrived with an image of America shaped mainly by dramatic headlines, experiences like this reveal a quieter side of the country. American abundance is not always about making something enormous. Sometimes it means being close enough to a regional specialty that an ingredient treated like royalty elsewhere gets to relax by the ocean. In New England, lobster does not need a tuxedo to prove it belongs at the table. It just needs butter, a toasted bun, and preferably a view of the Atlantic. PB&J wins again? A peanut butter and jelly sandwich is probably the least impressive looking food ever asked to represent America. 2 slices of bread, 1 brown spread, 1 streak of jam, and absolutely nothing that suggests a chef spent the afternoon arguing with a reduction sauce. Yet this humble sandwich reveals something visitors often miss about American food. Some of the strongest flavors here are tied to memory rather than spectacle. PB&J is everywhere in American childhood. School lunches, road trips, summer camps, after-school snacks, hurried mornings when somebody had 7 minutes before the bus arrived. The sandwich became popular because it was inexpensive, portable, and almost impossible to mess up. The National Peanut Board has often cited an estimate that the average American eats roughly 1,500 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches before graduating from high school. Even allowing for individual differences, that number explains why Americans rarely discuss PB&J like an exotic recipe. They talk about it the way people talk about a song they have known since they were 6. That can puzzle Europeans at first because the ingredients themselves are hardly unfamiliar. In the Netherlands, peanut butter, or pindakaas, has long been common on bread. British supermarkets are full of jam, while French breakfasts have made bread with butter and preserves perfectly ordinary. The cultural jump happens when an American calmly combines the nutty, slightly salty peanut butter with sweet fruit jelly and treats the result as completely normal. The first bite explains the marriage better than any speech could. Peanut butter is dense enough to cling to the roof of your mouth, like it has signed a long-term lease. Jelly arrives immediately afterward with moisture, acidity, and sweetness, rescuing the situation before the sandwich turns into edible drywall. Soft bread keeps everything together, and suddenly 3 supermarket basics create a balance that feels much richer than their price tags suggest. There's something wonderfully democratic about that. American cuisine is often shown overseas through its loudest examples: enormous burgers, towering desserts, giant steaks, and meals photographed beside a human head for scale. PB&J comes from the opposite corner of the kitchen. It does not care about presentation, reservations, or whether somebody remembered to garnish the plate. A child can make one, a college student can make one, and a parent packing lunch before sunrise can make one half awake. That accessibility may be the real reason people become attached to it. European food culture also has deeply emotional everyday staples. A French person may have childhood memories of tartines, a Brit might remember beans on toast, and Dutch children grow up with bread topped with everything from cheese to chocolate sprinkles. America's version simply happens to involve peanut butter forming an alliance with jelly that looks questionable until your mouth reviews the contract. For visitors spending weeks in the United States during the World Cup, foods like this can be more revealing than famous restaurants. Anyone can photograph an expensive steakhouse dinner. Learning why an American gets oddly happy over a cheap sandwich tells you something more personal about the country. It shows a culture where comfort does not need ceremony, and nostalgia can cost less than a cup of coffee. By the time a visitor starts understanding why Americans keep peanut butter in the pantry at all times, the United States begins feeling less like the exaggerated place often presented in headlines, and more like somewhere surprisingly familiar. Sometimes America wins people over with barbecue smoke and lobster. Sometimes it only needs 2 slices of bread. Maybe the biggest surprise was never the Chicago hot dog, the brisket, or the lobster roll. It was discovering how much of America can hide inside an ordinary meal. Regional pride, immigrant history, family memories, and a willingness to make food fun without apologizing for it. So which American dish do you think every European visitor should try before flying home? Tell us in the comments, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that reveal the America people rarely see from afar.